walk through how to set up the Read Your Body app to include FEMM stamps and how to chart optimally for both natural birth control and for health in terms of actual app setup. So we're charting with FEMM, and what we're going to do is just take a quick look at this chart and notice in the middle you see those little circular colors labeled ES, labeled G. They're colorful. These are just called stamps. They're basically the way that we chart cervical mucus and bleeding observations. Above that we have our temperatures. Below that we have sensation, LH testing, intimacy, notes, and then some custom data stuff as well. So we're going to go through exactly how to set this up. You'll also notice in the middle there's kind of a yellow shaded part. That's the fertile window or the ovulatory phase. And it can be really helpful to know how to highlight that in the chart so that not only are you manually noting that for yourself, but to be able to see it actually on the chart is really useful just to kind of keep it at top of mind in real time. So let's head over to the bottom left menu button, and we're going to click on this, and we're going to go through setting up our data entry page. I want to give you a brief showing of my data entry page. You can see at the top there's the temperature entry. Below that we have our cervical mucus stamps. Below that we have the notes section. Notes is where you note things ranging from ES, notes about your cervical mucus, ES meaning the type of cervical mucus, ES is a subtype of cervical mucus. So you're noting things like the qualities of the ES mucus in the notes section. That's very important when we're charting with FEMM. I'll get to how to do that later, but just know that the notes section is important to note things like that and other stressors that you might come across in life. Below that we have our fertile window. Below that we have LH testing, sensation, intimacy, photos, journal, and lifestyle custom info. The difference between notes and journal, by the way, is that notes are limited to 35 characters and they show up right on your actual chart. They're very, very useful, like I said, for charting the qualities of your ES mucus, and that is part of the FEMM method of charting. However, journal, that is going to be hidden on the chart. You view it by tapping on the little journal icon and then viewing your journal entry. The journal section is where you'd write things that are longer than 35 characters that are relevant to your chart, your cycle, your stressors, your health information for that cycle, things that are going on in life, as well as I like to use it also for details relating specifically to like intimacy, like if there's something that I want to remember about, the type of intimacy that was had. That's something that I want to note on the chart in real time, but I don't necessarily want, that to be showing up publicly if I'm sharing the chart on social media or if I'm showing my friend the app or something like that. So it's a bit more of a private place to put something like that. All right, so now that you have an idea of what this data entry page looks like, and we've already seen how the chart looks, let's actually start to set this up. Like I said, let's go to the menu option in the bottom left. Now we're going to go to the top and tap on settings. Now we're going to check the display options one in the middle, and we're going to go to the top and hit fertile window shading, and I want you to toggle on fertile window shading and then select open and close. Now you're going to go to your data entry button on the bottom left. Probably you're going to see the entry for fertile window now here at the bottom. So to reorder that on your data entry page, we're going to hit manage items. Now here is where it's really helpful to have these items in a certain specific order. I have it so that the temperature labeled here thermometer oral is at the very top. This way when I wake up in the morning, I wake up, I'm groggy, I'm tired, and I just want to chart my temperature right away as quickly as possible. I don't want to have to, scroll through my data entry page. It's just right at the top and available. So we want that under items to track to be dragged and dropped up to the top. Below that is where we want stamps. Now, probably are not going to have stamps toggled on. So I want you to scroll down, find where it says stamps, it might be in gray, and you're going to toggle that on. Then you're going to press and hold stamps, and you're going to drag it up to the top. Below that, you want to have note. Below that, you want to drag fertile window, then LH testing, then sensation, then intimacy, then photos, then journal, and then lifestyle custom info. Below that, you'll see there are also more options in gray for things like cervix, monitor, pregnancy tests, note 2, note 3, because you can add in other lines for notes. Fluid, I want you to actually have fluid untoggled because fluid is just going to be redundant for stamps. They're basically the same thing, except fluid is not as customizable as stamps are, specifically, like I said, for FEMM. If you're not charting with the FEMM method, this video won't be as relevant to you. But just know that if you're charting with stamps, you don't need fluid. It's just going to be redundant and distracting, so make sure that that is not toggled or that it's toggled off. Below that, you might have calculation, progesterone test, partner notification, note 2, or in this case, vaginal stands for a secondary temperature charting, so vaginal temping. But you might have something there that might be labeled something like temperature 2 or something like that. I've customized it, so that's why it's labeled that way. Okay, now we're gonna also jump over to display on chart. This is basically how all these items over here are displaying on your actual chart. So they're gonna look different and they're gonna be in a different order from when you wake up and actually put in the data versus how the data is gonna show up on your actual chart. So, you know, you want these two things to probably be a little bit different. So we're gonna go manage them and display on chart. So you're gonna wanna do it in this order. The time taken is gonna be at the very top, and this is just the time that you take your temperature in the morning. Now, if you're using something like a temp drop, this is not gonna be relevant. Time taken is very relevant though when it comes to vaginal temperatures and oral temperatures. Below that, you don't need to have sleep. For me, that's just a custom thing. But below that, you want to have disturbances, and then temperature, and then count of 6, and then stamps, sensation, LH test, intimacy, note, and then all your custom data stuff that might be in different order. And somewhere in there, you know, there'll be journal and photos, and like I said, just more custom data stuff that will, you know, you'll be able to add that on your own later. We're now going to go back to the data entry page, and here's where we're going to really start to customize more stuff. So under the temperature label right here, you're going to hit the little gear icon, and here's where you can label the type of thermometer that you're using. In my case, I'm just using thermometer oral. And then below that, for time taken, you want to check off the current time. This way, when you go to chart your temperature, it'll kind of auto suggest the current time as the time entry for the day. Here's where you can also connect things like temp drop with temp drop integration, but we're not going to do that in this video. Below that, you have your temperature units. You can select which one you want. Below that, for display on chart, you want to select rounded. For number of cover lines, 1. For count of 6, just select valid temps. And you want to also select annotate temps and circle. Again, we won't get into the exact reasons why for all these settings at this moment, but just know that this is relevant to how we chart with the method. Below that, for stamps, we're going to select this gear icon and select the FEMM stamp set at the bottom, which includes more colors, so like brown bleeding, spotting, light blue, dark blue, gray, and yellow. And you're going to go back, and now you'll see you have those options there. So if they weren't there before, they should now be there. You can see that in the stamp section, this is where you would select when you have the start of a new cycle. So just so you know, that's where that is. Below that we have our notes. Like I said, this is where you would chart your like ES mucus qualities. So for example, let's say I had a tiny amount of stretchy, clear, lubricative cervical mucus that I saw twice in one day. That's how I would chart that note for that particular observation along with the stamp itself, right? So I'm just going to undo that, but that's just an example of how that would look. For the fertile window, you would toggle opens today, and then once it closes, toggle closes today. It'll look like this on the chart, where it's highlighted in a light yellow color in the middle, covering the fertile window and the ovulatory phase, depending when you've opened it and then closed it. Going back to data entry, below that we have LH testing. Now here you can also customize this with the gear icon. I just have, for number of tests per day, I actually chart or take my tests multiple times throughout the day, but I just have one charted per day, because that way I'm just essentially charting like the most relevant information. If I just get negatives all day, I just leave the whole day as negative. Obviously, if I get a positive throughout the day, I just mark the whole day as positive. Below that we have sensation, and we're going to customize that with the gear icon as well right now. So here we're going to do this, and we're going to edit, and you're going to select the little pencil icon to edit each of these. So you want to have all these sensations: dry, smooth, lubricative, cold, wet, and gushing. Now, really you only need the core three: dry, smooth, and lubricative, but cold and wet and gushing, those are like, just even more specific, even more informational, and those are just variations of what you might experience, so they can be helpful to have noted. To edit them, you're going to tap on the pencil on the left, type in the name of the sensation. For dry, you want to select the gray color and the little gray icon on the left, and press save. Below that, for smooth, we're going to edit that title to smooth, select kind of a medium green color, and then select the little two droplets and press save. Below that, lubricative, select a darker color, select the little arrows pointing right for the icon, and then hit save. For cold and wet title, again darker color, and the little full droplet icon, and hit save. Below that, gushing, and for this I select a darker color, and I kind of select this little starburst icon to indicate like a gush, like a bursting gush, and then you're going to save that. The gushing sensation is kind of like that sensation that you might get during your ovulatory phase on mucus days, when you almost feel like, oh my gosh, did I just start bleeding? Like, do I have my period? But in fact, there's not any blood, and it's just a gushing sensation because there's mucus that's present. Below that, we're going to customize intimacy next by hitting the gear icon in the top right box of intimacy. And for this, you want to have these basic ones toggled on: unprotected, condom, withdrawal, non-PIV, solo or masturbation, and other. There are also these other options, so if you're using things like a diaphragm or a cervical cap or an IUD, or if there's sterilization, you can select those. Insemination is specific to if you're trying to conceive and you're doing an insemination procedure. So sometimes there's some confusion. People think that insemination means unprotected sex, and that's really not the case. Insemination is a specific procedure for when you're trying to get pregnant, and you're literally inseminating a semen sample into yourself, one way or another, and it's just totally different from unprotected natural sex. Okay, we're going to go back, and we're going to look at photos below and journal below, and then we have lifestyle custom info here at the bottom. Here's how to manage the lifestyle custom info. A quick just word of advice is custom info can be very, very useful, and there are some things that you definitely want to have here, like travel, illness, and stress. Those are some very basic ones that I would say are pretty much required and strongly encouraged. But you can also add things like working out, hiking, headaches, medication use, or COVID test results, or things like that, things that are relevant to your overall health, your health goals that are unique to you, and what's going on in your cycle. Things that can impact your biomarkers. So a lot of times people will also include like alcohol in this area. And this way they can note if they've had, 1 drink or 3 drinks, or wine or tequila or whatever. Another, thing that you could chart here is like cannabis use, or, the use of like ibuprofen or something. Things that, may have some impact on your overall health long term. Here's how you manage them, clicking on the gear icon in the right top corner of the box. And to do a new one, you'd hit new in the top left. To edit them, you just would hit edit, and you can go back and edit any of these ones that you might already have set up. You're going to hit done. To reorder them, you're just going to click on the 3 lines on the left, drag and drop to where you want them to be. I like to have things like illness, stress, travel, and fatigue kind of like grouped, kind of near the top, so they're just easy to select. And we're going to go and select a new one just to see how this is made. And I'm just going to pretend that we're going to type in, let's just say like, I don't know, what's a health thing? Let's just pretend it's like headaches or something. So for headaches, you're going to choose the icon that'll show up. This one looks good. And below that, you're going to select whether you want emojis, levels, test results, text, or toggle. So for example, I'm just going to deselect this and let's just kind of pretend that we're just doing a general one here. So for example, emoji, for this one, basically it lets you select like up to 5 different emojis to indicate what you're talking about. Emoji is great for like the illness custom data line. That way you can have the section for sickness or illness. But let's say if you have a fever, you can select a little thermometer. If you are nauseous, you can select a little green nauseous emoji guy. If you have a cough, you can select a coughing emoji or a blowing nose emoji, something like that to indicate how you're sick, especially things like fever is very important. Levels is great for things like cramps or headaches to indicate the intensity level of that sensation or that symptom. Test result is great for like COVID testing. Text and numbers is great for if you're charting over time goals like, distance that you've run or distance that you've walked or hiked, or like weight, or like the number of hours that you get for sleep, or something like that, something that's text or numerical. And then toggle is just simply like toggling on yes or no if something happened. So like if I go to Vermont, I toggle on that I went to Vermont. If I get sick, I select that I, had the little coughing emoji. This is where you can get really specific with the customizations. So that pretty much covers the custom info, and here's my chart again. I believe I've covered everything here today to get through the app setup in depth and detail. If you have absolutely any questions and you're a client, please message me immediately on Signal. Please don't hold back with any questions you might have. I don't care how tiny they seem. I don't care how silly they seem to you. I assure you they are not tiny, they are not silly. And it's really important to discuss these matters, especially as you're new to charting and getting started, so that you can just immediately get these questions answered, immediately build your confidence and your independence with charting, and just kind of build up that snowball effect of like, tackling these little goals and taking these little baby steps one at a time until you're really building your skills very quickly. So please, again, do not hesitate to reach out to me via Signal if you're a client. If you are a viewer on YouTube and you have a question, please go ahead and leave it in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer general questions. I can't answer, specific questions that are unique to your charts or your cycle if you're not a client of mine, because it's really important when I work with clients to ensure that, we're on the same page. So for example, if you're asking me a question about cervical mucus, with my clients, I can really be on the same page as them because I am assured that they've learned about cervical mucus through the standardized way in my course, versus, a viewer who hasn't taken the course. If they're asking me a cervical mucus questions, I have no idea what their previous experience is like or their knowledge. I have no idea if they're charting cervical mucus correctly, or if they're on the same page as me about that. So I don't want to, mislead anyone in that way, or, promise answers that I can't give. If you are seeking more specific feedback, please go ahead and contact me via the link in the description to go ahead and just schedule a call, and we can meet and talk and discuss your goals with FEMM. All right, I hope this finds you well, and please get in contact if you have any further follow-up questions. I will see you all very soon and talk to you later. Bye.